Welcome to a new episode of the Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies podcast. I'm your host Morbo, and with me, as always, everyone's favorite US independent wrestling fan, Sebastian.
Thank you as always for the introduction, Morbo, and welcome everyone to this week's episode of Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies. And our guest today is a real veteran of the independent wrestling scene of the Southeast. He has been active as a commentator, he has been active in the ring, but most importantly of all, he has been active as a manager. He has been active for promotions like NWA Wildside, Scenic City Invitational, TWE, and he is known as a manager, especially known as a manager of the Coven of the Gold, and we're very happy to have him as our guest today. And with that, welcome and thank you for taking the time, the Reverend Dan Wilson.
Thank you so much for having me, and ghastly greetings, my friends.
So for the few people who don't know who you are, who is the Reverend Dan Wilson?
That's a loaded question. No, real brief synopsis, because there's a lot, because I'm old and I've been doing this a long time. But I started in the business in 1999 as a ring announcer. I got the gig as a commentator at NWA Wildside in the year 2000. And that was what I was first really known for from 2000 to 2005, there as the play-by-play announcer, along with Steven Prazak, who was my broadcast partner's former ECW announcer. He'd also done some important stuff in the Southeast prior to that. And even the Global Wrestling Federation in Dallas, Texas. So I learned a lot from Steven about just commentary in that role from 2000 to 2005. And my biggest claim to fame during that time was coming up with AJ Styles' nickname, the Phenomenal One, which that's probably the thing people will remember me for over even the Reverend and other stuff, I guess, in the greater wrestling world when it's all said and done.
You have been part of matches as an active wrestler, you are a manager, and as well as a commentator. Did you want to be active in all these three roles from the beginning when you started in the wrestling business?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, right? I think when you grow up as a wrestling fan, you always want to be a wrestler. And so, yes, I have records. If you look at results, there are many matches I've wrestled in, but those are all as a manager. It was always a stipulation where, okay, if such and such happens in the rest week, and if I was a heel, of course I was going to get my ass beat, but if I was a baby face, then I was helping exact some sort of revenge. So any wrestling I've done was as a manager. But as a child, if you're growing up a fan, you always want to be a wrestler, but I was aware of my physical limitations. I'm not a big guy, especially when I broke into the business, and I've had prior injuries from childhood that prevent me from being a full-time wrestler. So it was something I knew right out of the gate I really wasn't going to be able to do, but I knew I could talk, and I knew I had personality, and I knew I'd had acting experience in theater and other things, and in music, performing, fronting bands and things like that. So I knew I could be a performer in wrestling, and so just using what skills I had, commentary was the first opportunity, or announcing in general. And then in 2005, when NWA Wildside went out of business and another promotion called NWA Anarchy kind of took its place, Tank, actually, of all people, the Bloodbath Behemoth, one of the two Tennessee Treasures, Tank, he said that he wanted to start a new group, and he wanted me to turn heel and be the manager of that. And that's where the Devil's Rejects and the Reverend character was born. And that's what mainly I've been doing since about 2005.
Especially these days, you are mostly known as the manager of the Coven of the Goat. How would you describe the stable to people who don't know it? Or in other words, what is the Coven of the Goat?
The Coven of the Goat is a hillbilly satanic cult. We reside in the hills of Tennessee. That's what most people would consider us, but it's a little more than that. There's a biker element. There's a heavy metal element. There's a horror movie element. We're a bunch of wild and rowdy, crazy folks from the hills of Tennessee that might make you disappear if you wander out onto our property.
You get referred to yourself as the high priest of the Coven of the Goat. How did this nickname come into existence?
Well, any coven, that comes from witchcraft, like a coven of witches. It's actually a good thing you bring that up, because sometimes I see it miswritten in reports and other wrestling news things as Covenant of the Goat, and it is not. It is coven, like a witch's coven, like the Merciful Fate song, come into my coven and become Lucifer's child. So it references that this sort of occult references, like a coven of witches. And so in a coven of witches, you have a high priest and a high priestess. So it's only fitting that I, as the Reverend, was the high priest and the person that came up with this group and the vision and everything else, which has really grown beyond my greatest expectations. It's really a legacy of a stable that we started back in 2005 when I first became the Reverend, called the Devil's Rejects, and that was Tank, Iceberg, and the Angel of Death, Azrael. And over time, that ended. Iceberg had to retire due to a physical limitation, so we ended the Devil's Rejects. But I wanted to continue that for the next generation, because that was a very important stable in the Southeast. It was written about in books, and we did things that a lot of independent groups just didn't do, as far as like generating interest and drawing crowds and things like that. So wanted to pass that on to the next generation, and so we recruit people like the Killbilly Nathan Mowry and Jaden Newman and CJ Lawler and the younger guys to help sort of move this forward into the future, because Tank, of course, is almost 30 years in the business. He's not going to be around forever. Azrael, we've got him back for a few appearances as a guest member, but also he's been in the business a long time. He's not going to be around forever. But as far as me as a manager, I can do this for a long time. So it's about keeping our legacy going and moving things forward.
You were a part of the IWTV show The Death Of last year as both a producer and a commentator. Did this project start, and who came up with the idea, and how was the experience working on something so out of the box? Because for me, it was like a beautiful homage and love letter to the 80s horror slasher movies, and also to wrestling and hardcore wrestling.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that was a really fun project. One of my most favorite things I've done in the 25 plus years I've been around. That spawned from Jerry, Gerard Derling, the head of IWTV, one of the heads of IWTV. And he's always got these wild, out of the box creative ideas. One of the reasons I love working with Jerry. He really tries to bring a full entertainment experience to wrestling. And as far as a producer on that, I just pitched some ideas and some concepts and things, especially in terms of how our stuff was presented. But overall, but it was mostly Jerry and his idea. And I know Cruel was a big collaborator as well. I think a lot of it was his ideas as well, showing up in there. But they just wanted to do something different. They wanted to kind of make a wrestling horror movie, but the kind of selling point was going to be that, of course, the blood was real, because it's a horror movie up until it culminates with an actual death match between Cruel and Matt Tremont. And the experience was great. It was a long shooting day. It was like a 12-hour day. And we got dressed at like 2:00 and had to sit around until like midnight before it was time to shoot our stuff. But I thought it was really great as far as expanding like the characters and presence of the Coven of the Goat, and the whole image that we're trying to project, and the atmosphere that we're trying to project, and kind of weaving us into the stories of Cruel and the Killdozer. And that was just such a fun, cool thing. I think the highlight from that, one of the things I'll brag on myself a little about that they all still talk about from that shoot was, of course, they had the IWTV crew there, but they also had this film crew from a company called Cole Creative, who makes commercials and movies, and they don't really deal with wrestling all the time. They mainly deal with production, Hollywood, that type of stuff. So I get up to do my bit, and it's wrestling like we're trained to get it out in one take and move on. And I didn't have a script. I had some bullet points that I knew kind of what I was going to say, but I was just feeling it, and I just went with it, and I nailed my promo. All of that was in one take, and the way those people's jaws hit the floor, and we're talking about that the rest of the shoot, just made me giggle and made me very happy.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm watching wrestling, and especially indie wrestling now since 2001, and that one-take speech was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. I just want to say.
Thank you.
One of the promotion that comes to mind thinking about you, and you already mentioned this as well, is definitely NWA Wildside, which existed from 1998 to 2005. You were active there in multiple roles, as you always said, commentator, manager, also active competitor. And first of all, how would you describe the promotion? How would you describe NWA Wildside as well as working there to our listeners?
Wildside was a very underrated promotion. It's basically what was responsible, especially in the Southeast, for the popularization of the modern indie wrestling style. We were kind of a weird blend because our story, and that's kind of what we still try to do at TWE today. It's kind of a blend of Smoky Mountain Wrestling and Memphis in terms of like the storylines and the Southern culture integration, and then the wrestling was just totally take the guardrails off and let them go nuts. And you had this amazing crop of young talent: AJ Styles, Jimmy Rave, Jason Cross, John Phoenix, Abyss when he was Justice before he even became Abyss, and then he came back once he went to Puerto Rico, and Dutch Mantel gave him the Abyss gimmick. But the Briscoe brothers came down, the Backseat Boys came down, everybody who was anybody in indie wrestling basically at the time made a stop at Wildside. So it was this really special thing, and it got popularized through tape trading. We were on syndicated television, but it was always very late, so it would come on at like 2 a.m. late at night on a small, low-power channel, but it was all over the place. That's actually how Matt Tremont became fans of my work, of all of the Wildside guys' work, was just watching that on WGTW in Philadelphia. So that was the cool thing about Wildside, was that it was a thing that was really a moment in time, and it influenced so much, but it hadn't really gotten the credit for that until the last few years, when streaming and GIFs and other things have kind of made it more readily available. We were doing a lot of the stuff Ring of Honor was doing like 2 years before they existed. So it was a really cool time to be there. I also learned Bill Behrens was the promoter, and I got to work under him, and he was a very brilliant dude who'd been a lot of places already and he'd worked for Jerry Jarrett, he'd worked for WWE as a syndicator, he'd worked for WCW as a syndicator, which is like putting their TV shows out. And that's how he kind of sideways himself into the wrestling business. And so he was the promoter of Wildside, and working under him, I got to learn a lot about booking, and I worked in his office and got to meet a lot of really big name wrestling people, got to know Dusty Rhodes at that time and Dory Funk Jr. and other people just by working in Bill's booking office and kind of running that. And that's like Jeff G. Bailey is a guy I met there who was like the head heel manager at Wildside, and he became my mentor as a manager. He's probably the most underrated heel manager of all time, the greatest heel manager on the indies ever, for sure. And I learned a lot about booking and storylines and just how to put wrestling together from him as well. So and I was like 19 years old going in there, and I left home. I lived in Tennessee. I moved down to Georgia to work at Wildside. And just got like this crash course education in wrestling. It was fucking amazing. And we're all still very tight. Like the Wildside crew, even with the ones we fight with, we disagree with. When things really go down, we always seem to come together and support each other. And no matter where life takes us, that time was so special. There was a bond with all of us.
You've been the manager of someone who's not only one of the first names that come to mind when you think about NWA Wildside, but also independent wrestling, especially deathmatch wrestling in the southeast of the United States, and that's Iceberg. What can you tell us about working alongside Iceberg as his manager?
Oh man, Iceberg is one of the all-time greats. I was one of the people, me along with Jeff G. Bailey, who of course was the steward of all of it, but I was definitely contributed a lot of ideas to the original character of Iceberg when Jeff G was his manager in 2001 when he debuted in Wildside fresh off a tour of Japan where he had beaten Mr. Pogo. And so we came up with this character. We knew Abdullah had recommended him. Abdullah the Butcher had recommended him to us. And we wanted to do something with him, so we kind of remade him into a white Abdullah the Butcher. And once he came back from Japan and had that victory over Pogo, we just kind of came up with this whole new character that was the No Pain Train. He was indestructible, and he drank blood, and he was just this incredible monster, unstoppable force. And he had a run, becoming one of the biggest stars in Wildside. And then, of course, when that ended and the Devil's Reject started, I started managing Iceberg in 2005. That's not the first time I managed him, though. There was a one-off hilarious story. It was like 2001, 2002. It's like 11 p.m. at night. I'm sitting in the Atlanta office for NWA Wildside, and the phone rings, and it's New Jack. And he says, "Hey, Dragon." He says, "I got you a booking." I said, "Oh, that's cool, man. Thanks." He's like, "Yep, it's in about an hour. Iceberg's going to be there to get you in about 30 minutes. And I'm like, "It's like 11 p.m. on a weeknight. What are you talking about?" He's like, "Don't worry, Iceberg will be there." So Iceberg shows up to pick me up. Like, mind you, I'm just an announcer at this point. I've not been a manager yet, other than on some really like low tier shit shows. But so Iceberg says, "You're gonna manage me," and so we go to the venue, and it is a strip club called Jazzy Tees in Decatur, Georgia, and there is a tough man contest going on inside the strip club. Not a wrestling show, mind you, like a tough man contest, like inside an octagon where they're not working it, they are having shoot fights. But New Jack had somehow talked this promotion into letting him and Iceberg have a hardcore wrestling match in the main event of the Shoot Tough Man contest inside the strip club with a whole bunch of audience full of naked ladies. And so we say, sure, it paid really well, but it was really insane because it was like a really rough part of town. And we were supposed to be the heels, and New Jack wanted me to go out there and get heat. And so I do. And these guys want to kill me. And I'm kind of legit a little scared. And then in the match, New Jack hits Iceberg with a pool cue. And it breaks off, and a giant chunk of the pool cue gets stuck in Iceberg's arm. And so we go back to the office, and it's like 4 a.m. This is like the first time I really hung out with Iceberg. And it's like 4 a.m. And I'm on the counter with a pair of pliers, like needle nose pliers, stuck in his arm trying to pull this piece of pool cue out. We finally get it out. We get him taped up. He goes home, and like that was our introduction to each other, and we were pretty much best of friends after that. So I started managing him in 2005, and he was just a dream to work with. I managed him all the way up until our last appearance was 2022. 2, which was the final appearance of all of the original Devil's Rejects together before Iceberg lost his foot, unfortunately. So yeah, it was a hell of a ride. One of the greatest. He was always so easy to work with. He always spoke up for me, and I mean, I saw Iceberg hurt people for disrespecting me. That's what a loyal friend and great guy he was.
You say, how important were your peers from the NWA Wildside time, like Iceberg, like Tank, like David Young, Scotty Wren, not only for independent wrestling in the Southeast, but also for independent wrestling in the United States as a whole in the early 2000s?
Oh, so much. I mean, so many of those guys really did not get their flowers. Or like Tank, it took him kind of coming back and having this second run to really start getting his flowers. So that's kind of unfortunate, but they're very important. Like, David Young is one of the best workers of the last fucking 30 years. And I don't think on the national stage he ever really got to show that. He was always put in a lower tier spot that was more of a comedy spot. David Young could fucking go. David Young could hang with anybody. I dare you, go back and watch that series he had with AJ Styles from 2002, right before they both got signed by TNA. It was actually that series of matches that got them signed by TNA. I was actually doing ring announcing at the Tojo Yamamoto Memorial Show in Nashville, where Jerry Jarrett offered them both jobs off of a match in that series. So go and watch those. If you don't understand David Young's importance, you will after you see that. When you see this like 240-pound dude who's built like freaking Arn Anderson, or maybe even more burly, who's out here doing all of the shit that David Young was fucking doing and going move for move with AJ Styles before AJ learned to slow down when he was at his fastest.
Do you say that you can still feel the influence of NWA Wildside today? For example, if you think about that Matt Griffin met Scott Hensley because of Wildside, or that we have Bill Barons who's still active as an on-air authority figure on Southern Fried Championship. And would you always also say that NWA Wildside lay the foundation for promotions like TWE, SCI, Action, Southern Fried Championship Wrestling?
Oh, absolutely. Without a question. The wrestling in the Southeast prior to Wildside is the reason that people kind of made fun of wrestling in the Southeast and it had a bad reputation was because that kind of low rent bargain basement wrestling was mostly what Southern independents were known for many years outside of your major territories like Memphis and other places. So once Wildside came along, there was a standard that was set, and I think it's been good and bad, because the good is obviously like it's just spawned a whole bunch of different promotions. Like pretty much every promotion around, there's some sort of influence from Wildside in the Southeast, whether that be small or big. There's very few that don't have some trickling influence. Either it's somebody in the office who was part of the Wildside crew, like it's just, or wrestlers or what have you. So there is a lot. I think in the state of Georgia, in some ways, it became a hindrance because it was this like impossible standard that everybody that followed it kind of tried to live up to, instead of figuring out how to carve their own niche and make their own identity. And I think that hurt a lot of people for a lot of years. I think maybe, over 20 years after the fact now, they're probably getting over that. But I think for a long time it was.
Speaking of wrestling in the Southeast, you were a commentator on the first Scenic City Invitational back in 2015. What are your memories of these two shows?
Oh, Scenic City is very near and dear to my heart. That's another thing that I was also kind of secretly on the creative team for. There was an original group of about 5 of us that came up with the concept. It was not my initial concept, but I did help them kind of workshop it and put it together. And it was basically, the idea was that there's never really been a tournament in the South that got the kind of attention that those super indie tournaments on the West Coast or the Northeast or other places in the U.S. got. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to raise the profile of the Southeastern scene and do something similar. And it was supposed to kind of represent the best of the Southeast plus some of the greater indie wrestling world to show that these guys could hang with those people. And the commentary gigs I've taken basically since Wildside ended. I don't love doing commentary much these days. I don't hate it. I know I'm decent at it, so it's fine. But like it's if an opportunity comes up, I'll take it. But Scenic City, I was asked to do commentary. I wasn't really actively managing anyone much at the time. And I thought it would be a good way to be sure those stories were told the way the people that designed them wanted to be told. And I always really enjoyed doing commentary on the Scenic City events and contributing to the creative part of it. And I did that for several years until I took a break from wrestling. And since I've been back, I don't really get involved. They do come and, will ask my opinion on stuff and filter things through me as far as the show goes. But I try not to stay too involved in the creative of it because it's a headache being involved in creative and wrestling. And I do help so much with the TWE stuff that I try not to spread myself too thin. So, but I'm always there for them to ask me questions and things. And it's been nice to reconnect with Scenic City since we've been back in wrestling since 2021. And been a part of every event they've put on since then. And I've had a great time doing it.
Another Scenic City event where you were active as a commentator was the Scenic City Rumble back in 2017. And I would like to know, was this show something special for you, given that your longtime friend Tank won the Scenic City Rumble that year?
Oh, it was very cool to see. Yeah. Like my relationship with Tank goes back a long time, even before I started managing him. So I met him. It was like 99 or 2000. It was right when I first got in the wrestling business. There was a funny story about that. In that Hank, in the early mid 90s, I guess, had gotten into an altercation at a show in a match with Gypsy Joe, who was my uncle, and Joe roughed him up pretty good. And so I had kind of heard from the guys in the locker room that, oh, Tank's going to show up. He's not going to like you because of this thing that happened years ago. And it was actually the opposite was true. We ended up bonding over music and movies and other things. And he's been one of my best friends ever since. As I mentioned, it was his idea for me to turn heel and become Reverend or become a manager, and which evolved into the Reverend. And here in a couple hours, I'm about to go to his daughter's birthday party. So that's a long-lasting friendship. So any victory that Tank gets, whether it be the Scenic City Rumble, whether it be getting to the finals of Scenic City this year, whether it be winning Matt Tremont Deathmatch Tournament 5, and then, of course, going on to GCW's NGI 9 on November 16th in a huge opportunity. I'm always going to be rooting for Tank and happy for his success.
A promotion that Tank also works for frequently is, of course, TWE. How did it start with you working for TWE as a manager? And how did it then get to you being responsible also for the TWE Performance Combine as well, and other things that you do there?
Yeah, it's a great story, actually. So TWE goes back, they've been in existence. We just celebrated the 11-year anniversary. And they actually started in an interesting way. So I used to run a show called NWA Chattanooga. And I ran that show 2010, 2011. My goal was just to bring some good wrestling to Chattanooga because much like Georgia prior to Wildside, there was just a lot of really shitty wrestling in town with guys that didn't look like wrestlers and carny promoters that want to rip you off and promise all these things and then not deliver on them and et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted some good wrestling in my hometown. So I started a show, and I knew that I had enough connections with people I'd known and worked with that I could get really good talent that lived not super far away, and we could have a good show. And so we did run a pretty successful show for a couple of years. We had some unfortunate stuff happen where the school changed ownerships. They didn't want wrestling in the building anymore. We moved to a different venue. The new venue in town just didn't really work out, and so we shut it down. And there was another promotion that started down the road called Empire Wrestling that basically a lot of the same people that were involved in my show went there. And so when I was running shows, a young man named Jaden Newman used to come and watch the live wrestling that we would put on when he was like a kid. His mom would come drop him off and he would just hang out at the shows. There's pictures and video you can see of little Jaden running around while Tank is like brawling and bleeding around the building. And he asked if we would train him. And we were not training people at the time because we were just running in a middle school. We didn't have a consistent building. So we didn't end up training him. He went on his own path, which led to TWE starting and other things. But there was actually a lot of resentment in the local community against Jaden when he first started the show. Because the perception, which was not really accurate, I don't think, but the perception was that, this kid got his grandpa to start him a show because nobody would book him. And it just, we didn't start off on the best foot. But Empire lasted a couple of years. It went out of business. We all went off and did our own things. When we came back to wrestling, we kind of crossed paths with Jaden and got to sit down and just kind of chop it up and talk to him. And actually, even before that, like I kind of got to talk to him because when I retired from wrestling in 2018, and then got bored off my fucking ass sitting at home during the COVID era, decided I had to come back because I didn't have anything else to do with myself. Jaden and Dylan were the first people I went and talked to because I knew they were running a show here in town and it was TWE. So we sat down and kind of hashed all that out. And now, of course, Jaden's become like one of my best friends. Like he's like one of my wrestling sons. He can come to me for anything. If he comes over to the house, we will feed him. Like he is, I'm going to support that dude forever. He's the best. And as far as TWE and like how all of that came about, so we just started working there as a talent, but Dylan Hales is the main booker and guy who kind of runs things for Jaden there because Jaden is the promoter technically because his grandpa was the financier of it. So like that's more he tries to stay out of the creative. He contributes, but like you can't, as talent, you can't be chiefly responsible for booking yourself. No matter what your intentions are, you're gonna have bias. So Dylan handles that. Right. But we can just contribute ideas and suggestions. And so like I just saw they needed help and I'd ran a bunch of shows and worked in prominent positions in the fairly major independent wrestling offices and knew I had a lot of knowledge to share. And first it just kind of started as me helping every now and again and like I felt like it. And but I kind of started falling in love with the place and everybody there and the whole acceptance that they have, where it's just a totally accepting environment no matter what background you come from. There's no discrimination. There's a lot of kids that probably wouldn't have a lot of community if they didn't have TWE. So I just kind of fell in love with the whole place. I wanted to contribute and help more. And that, of course, involved me to helping some with training and some with the other things and goings on behind the scenes of TWE beyond just creative. But it's just mainly because I believe in what they're doing. And we basically, everything I started trying to accomplish when I started trying to run shows in 2010 with NWA Chattanooga, I feel over the last 2 years at TWE, the team of me, Dylan and Jaden, with help from a lot of other helpful vets. Like we got Tank, we got Derek Neal, we got Brad Eisen, we got, there's a lot of really knowledgeable and helpful helpful dudes in the back. But this last 2 years and the thing that we have built there is the most special thing to me I've done in wrestling. And so, that's why I contribute and that's how I got involved.
Based on what you just said, how would you describe your current position at the promotion or the work that you do for TWE? Because I thought about this preparing for this interview, and I really had a problem putting a label on it, because pretty much it feels like you do whatever is in need to be done wherever your help is like wanted. Do you even have like a title, or is it like, okay, I help wherever I can?
Yeah, I mean, what we call that a general producer, like it's or a consultant, maybe. Like I don't know, yeah, but it really is indie wrestling. The thing I've learned, I came up in the era where they actually would back up the money truck to your house, and you would get that call and all of that. And those days are fucking gone, pal. It's the DIY world in wrestling now, and so you really have to take more of like a heavy metal band, punk rock band philosophy about how you do this shit, and look at it from that perspective, in that everything is DIY. So nobody's going to do it for you. You've got to find a way to do it on a shoestring budget with duct tape and a pair of pliers, but somehow you put it together. And so yeah, like I would say just a general producer, but it is one of those. Any of the three of us there, me, Dylan, or Jaden, or whatever needs to be done, one of us is going to hop up and try to do it.
Especially if we look at your work for TWE, would you say that the philosophy that Tank described on an episode of Wrestling Life, etc. on IWTV also influences your own doing, where he said that he wants to give something back to the next generation?
Oh, 100%. The whole point of this shit is preparing it for the next guy or gal, or them. It's like the whole, because none of us can do this forever. Everything is temporary in life and in wrestling. So you have to appreciate the moment while it's here, and you have to hold on to it. And when it is your time to go, then you have to make sure that the next generation is prepared, and that you have at least shared what you have learned, both the good and the bad, with them to help them on their journey as they carry it forward. Wrestling is one of the amazing things in the world, in any entertainment really, that is saved as media like this, that in any art that is preserved. It's one of the few ways that you can live forever. So while everything is temporary, your wrestling career, the moments of triumph, the moments of failure, if it is preserved, you are immortal. And that's something that I tell the kids a lot. It's like, yes, this journey is tough, and you should not do it if you do not want to do it. But it's a small price to pay for immortality, because especially if you hit on something that really reached people or connected with them in their hearts, then they're going to go back to that over and over, and people will watch it for years to come, long after you are dead.
Would you say that this philosophy is also what motivates you when it comes to the Coven of the Goat, when we look at you working with people like Jade Newman, CJ Laura, or Nathan Moe?
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely, because we want them to be able to carry on into the future, and hopefully, that they are better for it. That's the whole purpose. Like with Jaden Newman is a great example. Nathan Mowry too. CJ, a little bit different because his journey has been a little rocky, and we can talk about that. But first with Jaden, he was a very clean cut, babyface type wrestler who was a really great wrestler. And that's fucking awesome. But there's a lot of really great wrestlers. So he needed something more. And it was actually his idea originally. I know in storyline, of course, I recruited him and all of this, but it was his idea because he felt that his character needed a refresh. It needed something more. It needed another layer. And so we came up with the moral compass and the presentation of that, and how he is the one who shall lead us. So he is the guy who's primed. We've already said so. Tank, we know, is at the twilight of his career. So we've already told you, Jaden is the one who will take the mantle over. And there's so many great elements to this, because we've they've almost been able to incorporate, he's almost like a twisted youth pastor, if you're familiar with that culture in the United States, in the evangelical world, where there's like this clean cut look, but there's like something sinister underneath. And then, of course, when he is fully embracing the goat, he's got the mask and everything else, and there's all of this subversion, and there's all these layers to this character, and it really has flushed him out to where, and he's still out there putting on the great wrestling matches. I think some people may have forgotten a little bit how he could have the great wrestling matches because they were so focused on, oh, he's doing this new character. The point is that he can do both, and so he has grown as a performer. He has increased his arsenal of skills that he has for a promotion. And that's the point of the moral compass, and something I'm very proud of as far as what we're doing in Coven of the Goat. And the Killbilly Nathan Mowry. He is a guy who's only been active 2 years. He's the greenest of the bunch, and sometimes it shows, but he has more grit and heart than almost any wrestler I've ever fucking met. He is insane. He will do things that even the craziest of us haven't dared to do. He grew up doing jackass style stunts with his friends, and then he became a renowned filmmaker. So he's brilliant as well. This motherfucker has a gold record. Did you know that? Did you know Nathan Mowry has a gold record for directing the Judas video for fucking Fozzy? Yeah, but he's a humble dude, so he doesn't brag about these things. But he's such a fucking impressive guy, and he has grown so much as a wrestler in the last 2 years, and a character. He is finding his identity as the Killbilly. His promos have gotten fantastic. We have worked very hard with him to get him to the next level, and it's really starting to show. He is actually, as we speak, in Las Vegas this weekend in a tournament where he faced Neil Diamond Cutter in the first round. So the Killbilly is doing big things. I'm also very proud of him. CJ Lawler, very proud of him as well, but life kind of threw him some curveballs. He got hurt, and then he dealt with an illness, and so he's still actually not medically cleared to wrestle. So we've tried to look at other roles where he would succeed, because he does still very much want to be a part of it. So we've had him in the commentary booth some. Now we're working on him being the second manager of the Coven, because we're so many different places a lot of different times. It's kind of okay to have a second manager, because I can't be in more than one place at once. So and he did that at the Matt Tremont Deathmatch tournament, and got a lot of glowing reviews. So, excited for the future with him on the path that we are allowed to take, at least.
You say that you personally, but maybe also the Coven of the Goat, has a kind of a bridging function, or like a purpose of connecting the older, more experienced generation like Tank, Azrael, with the newer, younger generation, as you refer to Jay Newman or Nathan Mowry?
Absolutely. I feel like for a long time that's been an issue in wrestling. And that was one of the reasons I kind of was pissy with the business in 2006 or 2018 when I retired, quote unquote. None of us ever retire, unfortunately. If you can escape, I wish you luck, but I was not able to. So yeah, it's one of the reasons I was just kind of getting disconcerted with wrestling, was like there was a whole gap between the generations of wrestling, and it's still very prevalent, but in our world we don't do that. Where the younger generation was just completely discounting what the prior people who had done things and drawn money in wrestling had to say, and then also at the same time the old fucks were saying, just completely invalidating the skills and the passion of the younger generation, because the style and things that they were doing really weren't for them. And so it was not fun, because like if it doesn't get passed on, it will die. So there's always going to be some begrudging from the old to the new. You can go back and look. There's like letters where like Luthez was writing the newspaper about what a phony Harley Race was because he took too many bumps and he looked like a circus acrobat doing a dance. And, the same thing that old timers today say about the new wrestlers. So it's like it's a common theme, but there was in the past at least always an ability to kind of, as you say, bridge that and move that knowledge forward. And I'm glad that's a culture we've brought back in a lot of ways in the southeastern scene.
An example for that of the younger and the older generation coming together, you can also name the trip that you, Tank, and Jane Newman did during this year's WrestleMania week when you went to both H2O shows, Action Dean, ICW No Holds Barred. Tank was also active at the GCW Clusterfuck Battle Royal. So my last question, before Morbo will talk to you about what is next for you, what can you tell us about this trip during WrestleMania weekend?
Oh, one of the best trips of my career. With three guys I consider brothers and just love dearly. And people that like know me on a level that other people don't. Because that's important when you're traveling. Like I don't mind hopping in cars with groups of people, but if I've got to be stuck in a car for 8 to 10 hours with you, you better not annoy the fuck out of me, and you better not be somebody that is gonna make me angry or ill. And I'm a very chill person. I'm a very easy to get along with dude, but there are some folks in wrestling who are just a little much for a 10-hour car ride. And so to get to go up there with them for a week and have all of those bookings really raise the profile of Coven of the Goat, because we were on H2O, we were on GCW, we were on ICW. We had like 5 bookings and Jaden had like 4. Like, I mean, it was awesome. It was awesome. And it just the trip itself was full of a lot of crazy stories, but just the week in the hotel room was we definitely got very acquainted with each other, even on a level we weren't already. But those are the things that make this thing fun. So many of us are not gonna get that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So if you're not enjoying the times, enjoying the journey, appreciating the moments and successes you do have, then you're really kind of missing out on the reward of all of this, because sometimes that's the only fucking reward you're gonna get.
As someone who has already done and accomplished so much in independent wrestling, especially in the Southeast, what are your personal goals for the future?
That's a wonderful question. I'm very much a live in the moment guy a lot of the time. So I probably should think about the future more than I do sometimes, but I do think about it, certainly. Professionally in wrestling is just to keep having fun and feeling like I have a purpose, because I don't think the money is ever going to come. So I might as well enjoy what I'm doing, and whether that be performing as the Rev, which I love. I love the whole world and lore that we've built, and the content that we put out, and it's a great creative expression for me. I'm an artist at heart. I'm one of those guys. Like, I'm a wrestling guy. Like, I came up in the old school way of wrestling. My uncle was an old time legend. I know all about old school wrestling, but I was also like a theater kid and a front man for a metal band and all this. So like at my heart, I'm an artist. And like, so I just wanted to make art that I'm proud of and be happy with that, and make good friends and enjoy the journey, help people, pass my knowledge on, keep raising the profile of the Coven of the Goat and moving that forward to its next level. And hopefully, ultimately, we end at least. I think Jaden probably has a good shot at being a top star in wrestling. So I'm gonna do whatever we can to help get him there. Help keep developing the Kill Billy, look for new talent for the Coven of the Goat, for the future. We've already added some new kind of ancillary members. The Killbilly, when he goes out, loves to take beautiful women with him everywhere he goes, which is never a bad thing. And so he has this gang of wild and crazy gals called the Kill Betties that will run around with him. One of them's a girl named Bombshell. The other is a girl named Selena Cyanide. And, they're the type of gals you'd expect to run around with the Coven of the Goat. But they certainly can be seen around the world with the Killbilly. So we're still just looking at more new recruits for the future and trying to grow this brand and continue our Raise the Horns World Tour, hoping to stay active. I'm really loving wrestling right now, and a lot of that is just tied to not really caring about the destination and enjoying the journey that I'm on and taking everything as I can get it. We're trying to also take like quality bookings. It's nice to be in a place where we don't have to take every little booking that's offered. I appreciate the interest, but we also both are family men. Tank and I both are married, have kids. We do still try to be very present and active with our families. That's definitely our biggest priority, even though that's not really super in character. So you don't see a ton of that from us, but that's the truth. So certainly being there for them, just enjoying my time in wrestling. I'm only 43, so I feel like I've got quite a few good years left in the business and hope I can just contribute positively in whatever way that I can.
As someone heavily involved with the promotion, what are your goals for the future of TWE?
For TWE, I would love to see just more growth, more sponsorship. So, hey, out there, if you're listening, you want to sponsor TWE, help us keep the lights on. That would be great. Like to see it grow. I would like to see TWE run bigger venues, like outside of the TWE arena. I feel like that's possible in conjunction with other entities. There's conventions, there's concerts, there's other spaces I feel like we could be in Chattanooga that we want to explore. And just continue what we're doing, developing talent. The WWE's put they're eyeing the indies for developing talent. Like, I don't know if that's something that they want to look at TWE or if that's even something that works for us, but it's cool to see them out there acknowledging the indies. I know there's a lot of people that have shit on that, and like, I get being skeptical anytime a large corporation is like, here's some money, we don't want anything in return. I get that people could be skeptical of it, but I think overall it's a good sign for the indies that you see that level of acknowledgement, and that's what we've been doing anyway, is developing talent. So whether that's subsidized by someone with some money that could help us do that even better, or we continue to do it on our own, I know we're still going to keep churning out great talent like Jamison Shook, like Aaron Wade, like Casey Owens, like the list goes on and on and on, as far as the people that are trained there, and then the people that are just developed at TWE, like Anakin Murphy, and of course I think Cody Manhorn he also trained at TWE. I love seeing these guys come in and be at one level and then get to work a few months and tell a long-term story and do some shit where they're not just having matches. Matches are fine because it's wrestling and you don't have anything if you don't have the matches, but it's a whole lot better, in my opinion, if the match means something, if it's happening for a reason. And when you have a show that runs every other week, you can tell those stories that guys aren't getting to do at other shows. And that's one of the things I'm the most proud about TWE, is guys are getting to learn that weekly storytelling television wrestling formula that's almost a lost art. So I hope we keep doing that, keep developing talent, keep pumping guys up to the next level. I mean, my God, Darian Bankston, I think, he's been the TWE champ for over a year. I feel like he's a guy that's poised to blow up very soon, and we probably aren't going to have him around TWE very much longer.
When we look back on the last weekend at the date of this recording, would you say that the H2O and TWE Weekender was a success? And how high are the chances that we will see more weekends like this in the future?
It is almost certain that we will revisit the H2O weekend. As far as when, I'm not entirely sure. I think for things like that, you do need to give a little bit of breathing room so you don't burn the audience out. But I think as far as whether it was a huge success for everybody involved, everyone walked away happy. The events ended up being profitable. It was, it was good for the company, and it was good for TWE, and it was good for H2O. So we definitely will do more in the future. I think having the 3-day weekend was cool in that it was 3 very different events. So Friday night was Nightmare on Dayton Boulevard. That was the TWE Halloween show. So that was the culmination of TWE storylines like Big Dave and Aaron Wade and the Taekwon Hoedown match, and the Legion against Coven of the Goat, which had been building for like a year. These were TWE centric storylines on Nightmare on Dayton Boulevard. And then Saturday was we didn't really advertise a lot of the matches for Saturday. It was just TWE versus H2O. You knew you were going to get a unique show that paired the 2 promotions against each other. And that ended up being a super fun show. We had so many great matches, a lot of variety, from hardcore and deathmatch stuff all the way down to just exquisite technical wrestling and a lot of silly fun stuff. We saw the Poon Dog, for crying out loud. So TWE versus H2O was a huge success and a ton of fun. And then Sunday, of course, was the Tremont Deathmatch Tournament, and the first ever deathmatch tournament to be held in the TWE arena. And a huge moment for Tank winning his first deathmatch tournament since he won the IWA King of the Deathmatch, the South King of the Deathmatch, which was like technically the first Carnage Cup tournament back in 2005, I think it was. So yeah, it's been a long time since Tank won a deathmatch tournament. So that was a very, very sweet moment. Very appreciative of Matt Tremont, who's always believed in us, and put us over to other people. And it's all about who you know in wrestling sometimes. So if somebody's not willing to vouch for you, no matter how great you are, you're not really gonna get in other places. And Tremont's always been one of those guys that just sang our praises. It's just one of the greatest independent wrestlers ever, and one of my favorite people to be around in wrestling.
Okay, that's it. We are at the end of the interview, and as always, the stage is yours. You can plug and promote anything you want.
All right. Man, I really appreciate you guys having me on. Hello, all the fans in Germany and around the world. Thank you for supporting my insane journey over the last 25 plus years. I hope to continue to entertain, dazzle, mystify, etc., and bring you lots more great professional wrestling, both as the Coven of the Goat and in any creative projects I'm involved in, like TWE. You can follow me on social media. My tag on most all public social media is Rev Dan Wilson. That's Instagram, that's Twitter, that's Facebook, etc. So follow me there. Also follow my production company, One Good Scare Productions. On Twitter, it is OG Scare. Also on YouTube. You can see when I took my break from wrestling, I had a brief foray into low-budget independent horror filmmaking, and the 2 films I made are on that channel, as well as all of the promos that the Rev and Coven of the Goat. Those are produced between One Good Scare and the Killbillies production company, Kind Punk. We kind of split the duties on those. But so you'll see all of the Coven of the Goat stuff. And then I know the world doesn't need another old white guy hosting a podcast, but I do have a horror podcast called Seeking Human Victims, where me, my wife Annie, my best friend from childhood, the great Muji, and a host of other co-hosts, just talk about horror movies. It's nothing profound. We don't have any controversial opinions or anything, really. We just love horror movies, and we love talking about how they're made, and you can follow that. We just recently finished our last season, which was season 19 of the show, covering the life and crimes of Freddy Krueger. So we look at all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and that's all available anywhere you find podcasts. Just search Seeking Human Victims Podcast, And you can hear the Rev flap his gums about some horror movies. But be on the lookout for the stuff we got coming up. I don't know when this interview is going to post, but the NGI 9 in Orlando, Florida, Saturday, November 16th, the Bloodbath Behemoth Tank, off his victory of Tremont's Deathmatch Tournament 5, will be entering Game Changer Wrestling's biggest deathmatch tournament of the year with a who's who of competitors. Have you seen that lineup? He knows the odds are stacked against him, but he is in it to win it. If that has passed by the time this interview is posted, then go watch the VOD. You also want to check out TWE on IWTV. That's independentwrestling.tv. Tons of episodes, tons of back catalog. You like that old school Southern wrestling with the storytelling, with heels and faces and people that hate each other's guts and want to get revenge, but also a bunch of great wrestling in between. You like that, you'll love TWE. You liked NWA Wildside, you liked any of the other things I had a creative influence in, then you will absolutely dig Total Wrestling Entertainment. So check that out on IWTV, as well as Scenic City Wrestling and all the other great partners we have, like Action Wrestling in Chattanooga. Let's see. I'm involved in a lot, so I'm trying to see if I've covered it all. I think I pretty much have. 2025 is going to be a great year. The Coven of the Goat's continuing on into 2025. We've already got bookings starting, like, coming out up to April in 2025, so the calendar's filling up. But if you would like to bring us to your town, please contact me on the social medias that I gave you earlier, or you can email me at dan@ogscareproductions.com to book myself. That's not just for wrestling. Like, I'll appear at conventions, I'll do autograph signings, podcasts, you name it. Like, hit me up, ogscareproductions.com. And also, you can book any member of the Coven of the Goat that way, be it Tank, the Angel of Death, Azrael, only available for limited appearances, as CJ Lawler, the Killbilly Nathan Mowry, or the Moral Compass, the one who shall lead us, Jaden Newman. So if you would like to bring us in to cast our incantations on your town, then hit me up. Thank you so much for having me, guys. This has been a blast.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. It was an absolute honor. When Sebastian mentioned that we have the Reverend on the show, I said I'm probably gonna piss my pants because he is such a legend. I'm gonna be nervous probably. And I remember watching it in the early 2000s through tape trading. It wasn't easy to get access to NWA Wildside in Germany. It was possible through tape trading. I saw some old tapes and already seen you 20 years ago, and now I see you as the Reverend TW. It's just an amazing journey, and it was really really an honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you as always to you, Morbo, to you, Florian, and of course, thank you to you, Reverend. And as Morbo already said, it was an honor to have you on the show. It actually was like this, that when I traveled to the SCI this year for the second time, Morbo said to me, you have to ask the Reverend to come on our show. You have to ask him. And then I remember asking you, I think it was after night 1, and you were like, yeah, an honor for me to come on your podcast, and thank you very much for doing so. And yeah, thank you also to all our listeners, and I hope you will listen to us in the future again. Goodbye.